back to Right on Target with Mark and Scarlett. Well, today I promised you I was going to do a historical video, and today I'm going to talk about one of my all-time favorite heroes and kind of go in depth on him and how he kind of had an impact on my life. You know, growing up, most kids have a hero. Most kids have baseball stars, the guy that hits the longest home run or the most home runs, or the football player that scores all the touchdowns. I didn't have that kind of hero. I was into sports, don't get me wrong, but I can remember, I guess what happened with this particular individual and me. It was late night, one night when I was in grade school. I'm sitting on the couch watching TV at home, and on come a movie called Sgt York. It starred Gary Cooper. It caught my attention immediately, and I sat and watched that whole movie. And 2 days later, or later that evening actually, I found myself engrossed in an encyclopedia. Now, what's an encyclopedia? Well, for you younger folks, we didn't have the internet. We actually had these things called books, and we had to read them. So I started researching him, found it to be very intriguing. At that point, I knew about World War I, but didn't know a lot about the story behind Sgt York. Of course, the movie, like all movies, sensationalized his life a little bit, but a lot of it was found to be true when I got into it. I guess the story of Sgt York basically begins. He was born in 1887 in Pall Mall, Tennessee. Poor family, tried to farm for a living, had 12 brothers and sisters. His father died at an early age, and he had to take care of his brothers and sisters. He basically, for the lack of terms, raised a lot of hell. That is true that they showed in the movie. He was a drinker, he was a gambler. But one thing that stood true in the area for Alvin was the fact that he was a crack shot with a muzzleloader. He was probably one of the best shots in the valley at that time, and was well renowned in that area for being a good shot. However, he liked his liquor, liked to gamble, and liked to hang out in bars, and that was basically his mainstay for a while, until he had a turning point in his life. Basically, one of his best friends, a fellow by the name of Albert Dirksen, was killed in a bar fight, and it was like a light went off in Alvin's head. He seen that if he didn't change his ways, that his fate could be the same. That's where his path was headed. And so basically he, at that point, started going to prayer meetings, and for lack of terms, he found religion and became a very religious man. So he kind of turned himself around a little bit. In the movie, they kind of depicted it as Alvin. If you haven't seen the movie, you get a chance to see it, go ahead and get it. But they depicted Alvin as was going to buy some property. The property was sold out from under him. He was going to go, he went to and got basically into the liquor, and was going to go kill this individual that was supposed to sell him the property. On his way there, a lightning bolt struck him and his mule and his rifle, and basically it ballooned his rifle barrel out into the mushroom pattern that you see on some of the rifles when they explode. And that was basically the point in his life where, that was a sign from God that he needed to straighten up. That's not necessarily true how it happened in real life, although the movie did a good job of depicting that. But it was due to the fact that his friend was killed in a bar fight, and Alvin seen that he better change his ways or he's heading down the same path. So he ended up with religion. Well, along comes 1917, April 1917, we get into World War I, and the draft is implicated. World War I comes around, assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, and the U-boat sinking the Lusitanian. Bam, we're in World War I, and Alvin finds himself in a situation that, hey, I'm not big on this war stuff. War means killing. Killing's against the Bible and his beliefs. So he was basically had no intentions of ever signing up for the draft or participating in war at all. His local pastor, they depicted in the movie where his local pastors basically said that, you're going to have to go, Alvin. There's no choice. They're going to hunt you down if you don't go. And but he said we would put you in as a conscientious objector and maybe keep you out of it. Well, it didn't work for him. He ended up getting drafted and ended himself down at Camp Gordon. And but what they found out when Alvin got into the Army was, you know, here was this conscientious objector who basically was a crack shot, and I mean a crack shot. He had never even handled a rifle gun, that what he called a rifle gun that shot cartridges. He only ever knew about black powder, cap and ball. So they hand him a 30-06 1903 rifle at Camp Gordon to go through his basic training, and he's exceptional with it. They are shocked that here's this guy who's against fighting in the war, but yet he's like an excellent marksman. You know, and I kind of related to that when I was growing up, because I learned to shoot with the flintlock muzzleloader, and you know, and he was a crack shot with that, and then he switched over to the 03A3, and so he ends up at Camp Gordon. He ends up going to war. All during the time he's still a conscientious objector, and he ends up at the Meuse-Argonne offensive, and at that time I think he was promoted to corporal. He was actually instructing at Camp Gordon, helping teach recruits better marksmanship. And if you see the movie, it's kind of neat how they work in his marksmanship, his first time on the range, and how he is shooting all bullseyes, but he's upset with one that's off to the side just a little bit. He can't understand how that rifle shoots off to the left a little bit. So, I mean, they were amazed with his shooting. The thing about Alvin York was he was drafted at the age of 30. He went into the military at the age of 30. So he was kind of, as far as today's terms, when kids get drafted or kids join the military, 30 was kind of old for that time. For this time, it would be kind of early, old for that. But they ended up in the Argonne Forest in an offensive. He was under the command of a Sergeant Early. They were commanded to take a hill, Hill 223, on the first day of fighting, and they ended up behind enemy lines. And Sergeant Early got gravely wounded, and at that time he put Alvin in charge of the unit. Alvin took charge of the unit. He was the highest ranking officer surviving at the time during the battle, and he took command of the unit and basically took matters into his own hands. Now, he had other men there with him. I think that, I can't remember what the number was. I was thinking there were 17 or 18 of them left when this all took place, but they got pinned down on the backside of this Hill 223 with machine gun fire, heavy machine gun fire from a ridge. And Alvin took command of himself by himself and basically flanked the enemy. And at that time, I think, you know, Alvin kind of had a turning moment at that time as far as religion goes. He one of his best friends was Corporal Savage, who was basically cut in half by that machine gun fire at that time. And I think a light went off in Alvin's head, and in the movie they depicted as Alvin saying, "I took lives in order to save lives." And that was basically his reasoning. Those machine guns, he said, was killing a lot of guys, and he had to stop them. So they ended up with some, they took the first part of the hill, was a ridge, and they ended up with something like 18 or 19 German prisoners that they had to take care of. Now, granted, they were a skeleton crew at this time. There was hardly any of there was very few left in his unit to take care of 17 or 18 German prisoners. And as the battle continued, Alvin got up on the ridge and basically single-handedly stopped, I don't know how many different machine gun nests with the use. Now here's the push when it comes to history. There's some that say that Alvin used the 1917 British Enfield rifle, and there's some that say he used the American 1903 rifle, the Springfield 1903. It's kind of fuzzy, and if you get on the internet, they still argue back and forth today. Did he use the 1917 Enfield, or did he use the American 038 or the American 1903 Springfield? everything that I see that I read about Alvin was Alvin York is that he was issued in 1917 infield when they got to Europe, but throughout the course of time he did not like the sights on the infield, and he got a hold of a 1903 A3. And now what I understand was he used the 1903 A3 during his heroic acts. So he gets, so you know, like I said, I can't confirm or deny either way. There's a lot of argument about that. But he gets up on the ridge. He starts taking out machine gun nests. He starts taking out Germans using the 1903. At one point during the battle, he was charged by 6 Germans. He had to convert from his 1903 to his 1911 Colt 45, which that is confirmed. He did use the Colt 45. Now in the movie you're going to see where he's depicted picking up German Lugers and using those as a defense, but he never picked up a German Luger according to his memoirs. He actually used the Colt 45, and when it was all said and done, I think they ended up with 132 prisoners. There was the official military report showed that he took 28 killed. There was 28 killed up on that hill that he was up on, and they took 35 machine guns and 132 German prisoners. Now, I'm sure Alvin did not take all those prisoners by himself. I'm sure that it wasn't a single-handed act. I know as history goes down the line that the tales grow taller, but he did go up on that hill by himself and start taking machine gun nests, and he did I think eliminate a lot of German soldiers by himself. But just the whole fact that the marksman that he was and his heroic acts, it just amazed me when I was growing up, and that's kind of what made him my hero. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross that was later upgraded to the Congressional Medal of Honor. And to tell you what kind of guy Alvin was in his later life after he retired, or after he was mustered out of the military, he, in 1941, when we got into World War II, he wanted to go back into service. Well, they wouldn't take him back in because of his age, and he was a little bit overweight. But what Alvin went ahead and did his best on the home front. He sold war bonds to support the war effort. So he was a true American. He was a member of the All-American Division when he was in World War One, which I think was the 82nd. At that time, it was 82nd Division. It wasn't like the 82nd Airborne. It was the 82nd Division. It was called the All-American Unit. And like I said, he come home. I think he went on to sell war bonds, and but like I said, in 1941 he assisted on the or was it 41, I believe, he assisted on the making of the movie Sgt York with Gary Cooper. He okayed that, and he, all through his years, he never really wanted to profit from what he did over there. He was never really overly proud of what he did over there. He went on to okay, though, that movie, and Gary Cooper played that movie, and that was the movie that I seen that late at night that night. And if you ain't got a chance to see that movie, it's a great movie. It can be a little corny in spots, but it tells about his simple life and coming up, and what kind of marksman he was, and anybody that is a shooter should know the story of Sgt York. The guy was an amazing marksman. Like I said, he's my hero. That's the reason I went out and got me a 1903 rifle, and I ended up shooting in Camp Perry in the game shoots there because of the whole nostalgia of that military rifle and being used by Sgt York. So I basically, that's kind of him in a nutshell. Great American hero. My American hero. Like I said, he's not a lot of people. I don't know if a lot of people know about him, but he went on to in his later life. He finished out his life in Tennessee. I'm not sure what the date was he passed away, but I think he ended up. They got a big monument down there in Pall Mall, Tennessee, to his memory. Something I want to show you. I got on, one day I was happened to be playing around on eBay, and what I found was kind of amazing on there. Now it's a replica, and I had this made, and I want to show you this, basically this thing that I now have it in the store. It's kind of a monument to him. I have it in a store, and what I found was I actually got a 8x10 picture of him. It says Alvin York on it, Congressional Medal of Honor on it, but what I did find was, and this is kind of neat, I have an actual reproduction of his registration card for the draft, and I'm going to show you that. Okay, here's the picture I was telling you about that I have hanging in the store of Alvin York, Sergeant York. And this is basically an 8x10 of him after he was awarded his medals. And then if you look over here down at the bottom, then I had it put in gold, Sgt Alvin C York, Congressional Medal of Honor. But the really, really cool part is this right here. And I'm sorry for zooming in and out, but this is a copy of his registration card for the draft. And it says Alvin C York, and it's his date of birth right there, December, I think, 13th or 18th. And if you go down here, the really cool part is right here, where it says, do you have any exemptions to the draft? Exemptions to the draft. And it says right here, he wrote in here in his own handwriting, yes, do not want to fight, and then signed Alvin, call him York, which was his middle name. But it's kind of neat. Like I said, it's kind of a neat find right there. Do you claim any exemptions from the draft? And yes, I do not want to fight. So that kind of sums up what, the whole story about him. And I found that on the internet years ago, and I had it framed, and I thought that was pretty cool. So that's kind of it for your history lesson on Sergeant York. Like I said, a great American hero. So, let us know if you want to know about anybody else in history. I'm going to do some other folks here, but I wanted to start out with Sergeant York because it is kind of special to me, and it's kind of like my all-American hero there. So thanks for watching. Make sure you tune in, keep track of us on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and keep track of us on Facebook, and we'll see you next time.